old Steve Akley here at my place, the ABV Barrel Shop, suburban St. Louis, and I've got a kind of a fun topic today. This is kind of like a bar stool chatter type of topic. I don't want anybody attacking anybody in the comments because it is subjective, and there's no right or wrong answers here. And when you put together a list like this, you know up front that you're going to be leaving people out. So the Mount Rushmore of bourbon. Who should be on the Mount Rushmore of bourbon? You've only got 4. That's the rules. There's 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore, so you only get to add 4. You can't cheat and be like, well, I'm going to add a 5th because I want that. You have to pick out 4 people. I'd love to see who you pick out. I'm going to talk about who I would pick out on my Mount Rushmore bourbon on this video. Number 1, I think that you got to give some sort of nod to history. And, you know, if the Elijah Craig story was, as, you know, the marketing of it was absolutely the truth. He was like the first person to make bourbon. That would be your guy, of course. But, you know, bourbon is a little bit muddier than that. The history of bourbon is not quite that. It's not documented. The Elijah Craig story comes in a book that was written like 60 years after he died. Was it completely accurate? Was he the first person? I don't know. Let's say he did make whiskey, and he was making what we would call today bourbon. Yeah, he's a pioneer. He's early on, and he deserves recognition, and he deserves a brand named after him. But it's impossible to say who, quote unquote, invented bourbon. So I would go with somebody who really brought science and consistency to the world of bourbon, somebody who has an important role in bourbon. It's well documented because they lived a little bit after Elijah Craig, and I think that's Dr. James Crowe. I think he is one of the most important people from the world of bourbon, the first guy to really come up with what would become a brand name of bourbon, where people were asking for it. And he's got this great, incredible history that's lost a little bit because it now is a Beam product. And Beam, of course, focuses on the products that they developed, the things that are named after their family. And I get that. Old Crow is just a product that they utilize to move lower, I don't want to say quality, but lower priced whiskey that is probably not reflective to the flavor profile of normal Beam. So that's unfortunate. If it was a standalone brand and someone had just revived it, or someone just owned just that was just like the Dr. James Crowe Whiskey Company, and you had a distillery that was at the old site, which we know that that's still active today, but it was brought back as, the Crowe Distillery. I think that he would be remembered very differently than he is today. So I think for my pioneer, I would choose Dr. James Crowe. The next person, and this gets to be a little bit tough. Who is the kind of the person who transitioned bourbon from being this farming product, byproduct of farming grains, that's kind of sold mostly by farmers, to modern day whiskey. And I think there's 2 contenders for that. I think you've got Jim Beam, the man himself. The most famous name in American bourbon is Jim Beam. So it's hard not to include him. But the other one is E.H. Taylor. Of course, he was involved with the regulation that, the bottle and bond regulation. And I think I'm going to give the nod to him, the person to turn it. Knowing that it's tough. I hate leaving Jim Beam out because he's a person who, if you're not into bourbon, you know who he is. You know who Jim Beam is. If I say the name Jim Beam to someone who's never drank a drop of whiskey in their life, they probably know who Jim Beam is. If I say, do you know who Colonel E.H. Taylor is? They probably don't know. But for Mount Rushmore whiskey, I am going to say Colonel E.H. Taylor goes on there for the important things that he did in terms of, making whiskey a viable product that consumers had confidence in. He got some regulation, the first real true regulation from the U.S. government about a consumer product. And I think that was very important. So he's going to go on my Mount Rushmore whiskey. So Colonel E.H. Taylor. The third one that is going to go on there is Jimmy Russell. I think that Jimmy Russell of Wild Turkey, he transcends bourbon itself. He's been around to see it all. He started as working in a distillery back in 1954. He's still active today. He has the title of Master Distiller of Wild Turkey today as it stands in 2025. That's amazing to think about. The fact that this guy has 70 plus years in the bourbon industry, that's going to get you a place on Mount Rushmore. And and there's a lot of great distillers. I feel like the expense of this, the one that gets left out, that certainly is well deserving of this and kind of in that place, but didn't have, missed out on kind of this final bourbon boom where we've gone up from 2010 to now, and that's Booker Noe. I feel like Booker Noe is really an important person in the world of bourbon. He gets left out from his friend Jimmy Russell, and it's tough. I think that, I hate the fact that Booker Noe is not going to be on my Mount Rushmore. And someone could come up with the Mount Rushmore and he's on there, and I support that. Again, I don't think there's necessarily any wrong answers here. My fourth and final person is Bill Samuels Jr. I think that Bill Samuels Jr., what he did is what we would call today a craft distillery, because Maker's Mark was very small. You had the big heritage brands that were around forever, and then you had Maker's Mark, kind of the smaller brand, kind of doing its own thing. He gets them in the Wall Street Journal. He creates this buzz that leads to a buzz about bourbon, not just about his brand, but about the bourbon industry. Bourbon's at its worst time. It starts to come back. Bill Samuels Jr. has a part of that. He's also was so involved in the unique advertising and promotion of bourbon, and of course, building it to a huge mega brand. The idea that we've seen Maker's Mark go from a small family-owned company to a global phenomenon, pretty darn amazing. And Bill Samuels Jr. gets a lot of credit for that. So that's it. That's my group there. Dr. James Crow, Colonel E.H. Taylor, Jimmy Russell, and Bill Samuels Jr. That's my Mount Rushmore bourbon. Who is on your Mount Rushmore bourbon?